Oh my goodness. We're back. Well, I'm back. I haven't been in podcasting for a hot minute. Cody, I know you are a pro at this. How are you, first of all?
I'm good. Hey, it's a victory Monday. The Broncos hang on. Well, I wouldn't necessarily say hang on. The defense did, a lot of stuff in Sunday's game, but here we are, another show, another podcast for the folks to listen to over here at Mile High Sports. Very happy, Rachel, to have you here as part of the Mile High Sports family, being able to do this. Obviously, you can catch Rachel on Twitter. You can catch her in a post game. She just did a first ever post game live over there, Altitude Sports, the Mile High post game live with our good friend Vic Lombardi. So just a lot of moving pieces, Rachel.
There is so much, and it's so funny because, to be honest with you, I never thought I was gonna go back to podcasts. Okay, so you brought this up to me a couple weeks ago, and I was like, yeah, like definitely interested. And I was like, is that where I want everything to go? And it hit me yesterday that I was like, I actually miss podcasting. One, because there were so many times where I was like, I've been telling people this for forever about certain areas of the game. And I was like, but there's no proof. So everyone's going to come back to me and be like, well, where did you say it, Rachel? And I'm like, I miss it. I miss giving like the daily stuff. I just miss filling everybody in. I mean,
Well, I saw specifically last week when you brought up the RJ Harvey jersey change, and I will tell people, Rachel was there on Wednesday in the locker room. She told me beforehand, like, hey, RJ's going to change his jersey number to 12. Yep. Don't let that out yet because it's not out. And I was like, okay, perfect. Fair enough. Next day, RJ came out wearing number 12. So I know that some people on Twitter were like, yeah, right. You didn't say that. I was like, yeah, Rachel actually did say that. So I tell you, I mean, it's like folks don't pay attention, but obviously, Rachel's doing a lot of things in the media game. You know, we go to every practice, we go in the locker room after games, we go to every game that you see here at Empower Field. And obviously the Broncos 1-0, Rachel, after, a rocky offensive start there. Obviously I've got the film room coming up on Mile High Sports later on, but I mean, realistically, this is the first time the Broncos have gotten off to a win in week one in Sean Payton's tenure here. I mean, I think the last time the Broncos won a week one opener, I feel like Teddy Bridgewater was the quarterback. So, things have changed.
A lot has changed. And I'm not going to lie, I wasn't too surprised by the offense. Like, it was a little bit worse than I think I expected, but I was like, you know what? It feels like there is a little bit of nerves. There was a lot of moving parts, which we can talk about, too, when it comes to personnel and everything. But I knew it was going to be a bit iffy. I even looked at DMAC from Altitude Sports Radio next to me before the game, and I was like, my hot take is Bo's going to throw an interception early in this game. Sure enough, Bo did throw an interception. But I just felt like there was so much kind of compiled on all of the offense's plate, and we had to kind of see it really roll out. And just the nerves and everything else that came with it, I wasn't too surprised. Were you?
I mean, I was surprised at how inefficient they looked early. After initially that first interception. But I mean, I think the one thing that definitely stood out to me when watching this game with the offensive flow and the rhythm of it is, there were a lot of issues pre-snap. There was a certain juncture in the first half where guys came out and lined up on one side and they lined up on the wrong side, and they're having to rush to get to the other side to know what the play is. And, you have penalties, delay of games, and just negative plays, and I think that's the trend here. Is we talked about it all offseason long, is that the Broncos have to be able to come out and run the ball. Well, in the first quarter alone, they had 14 passing attempts compared to 3 rushing attempts. Now, we just got off the Zoom call with Sean Payton, and one thing he said was, a lot of those instances we have a run play called, but it gets checked out of because of the look that the defense is giving us, because if we run the football with that certain look, it's not going to go anywhere. And certainly the Broncos run game, I'd say through the first half, was not going anywhere. Really, it was RJ Harvey's run in that second half that really kind of exploded and kind of got the jump start going for the run game. But before that, they were averaging 3.3 yards per carry, and certainly that's not something you can have all season long here offensively. And of course, we're obviously going to get the Bo, but I wanted to hear your thoughts initially on the run game here of Denver early on, because we know Sean made the additions of bringing in J.K. Dobbins, drafting RJ Harvey, playing Tyler Bidet, and sitting Jaleel McLaughlin, which I know we'll get to a little bit later. But your thoughts on this run game that we've seen the Broncos and Sean Payton say, hey, we need to make this a bigger part of what we do.
Yeah, and Sean Payton even said, like, in the second half, it became much more clear of, like, we're going to run the ball. He never wants a defense to dictate what they're going to do. And I wasn't too surprised. I was expecting more, probably a little 50-50, but then you hear Sean Payton explain it behind the scenes, and it's like, you're right. I mean, the looks they were getting weren't necessarily made for the run game. So it's we all kind of judge in the moment, right? I just think about Twitter and everybody being like, oh, Sean can't help himself. Sean Payton's out here doing it. But you do have to respond to what the game is giving you. And while it sucks that we had to see so many passes, once the run game did get going, I was so stoked when I saw RJ's run. I was like, okay, this kid is everybody's hype train right now, and he is able to move the ball. The cuts he had, I mean, it was just so good. And then, of course, you have this big acquisition in J.K. Dobbins. I remember when it came to training camp or postseason, or oh my goodness, off season.
It was, it was like, in the middle of all that.
Yeah, and we're all waiting to see, like, is he going to sign? Is he going to pick the Broncos? What's it going to look like? And in his first initial talk with the media, I was kind of like, I'm not exactly sure how I feel about J.K. Dobbins. Like, he knows how to talk to the media very well, right? Like, he's very poised with what he says. And then watching him actually get out there and have a game, I was like, okay, like, this guy can do it. I feel like he's going to just kind of be this veteran presence to just really help the rest of the team out there. So I was surprised about Jaleel. We will get into that later. But overall, I was really impressed. And again, when you hear the backstory from Sean Payton, where it's like, and we didn't know what to do on some of the RPOs, it kind of makes sense if you look at what Tennessee was giving the Broncos.
And that's kind of a little bit more of a new look that the Broncos have added this offseason. I think you've seen a little bit more RPO heavy stuff, at least in the practices that we've watched in training camp. It's like, all right, they didn't do a ton of RPOs last year and in Bo's rookie year. They even have Bo rolling out to his left quite a bit now, which I found like we didn't see that a lot last year. Okay, so what's the reasoning for it? I understand we want to create misdirection, have the offensive line down block one way, get the defense to flow and hit the play action on the backside. I get it 100%, but it's got to be a little more methodical. You can get the play action stuff going if you get the run game going here. And obviously the defense saved the Broncos' tail quite a bit here. You're speaking of J.K. Dobbins and things like that. I wanted to go back here because we actually caught up with J.K. in the locker room after the game. And one of the things he talked about was how grateful, they are of the defense, how good the defense is. He called it the heartbeat there, and how the offense, they got to help them out.
The defense is fantastic. Like, we love those guys. We knew that they were going to be great. They added some guys this offseason. And, Coach Van Joseph is great. The defense is the heartbeat. So we got to help those guys out too. Like, they help us out.
I love that he calls it the heartbeat. Right? Like, it's true. The Broncos are going to have to ride on the tail of the defense essentially throughout the entire season. Yeah, the offense is going to look better, hopefully in coming weeks, but this defense is legit. And we said it all training camp too of, the offense doesn't look so good because of the defense. Well, yeah, the defense is that good. Like, that's just the truth. I was even seeing Jonathan Cooper. I was looking on Next Gen Stats after the game. He got one sack in 2.9 seconds. Like, the fact that he can move that quickly, think about 2.9 seconds, like, boom, that's 2.9 seconds right there. Like, it's insane how fast they can move. And even on Nick Bonitto's sack, like, really, it was Jonathan Cooper who applied the pressure and allowed Nick to get in there.
Yeah. Well, and you talk about Next Gen Stat too. Like, even Nick Bonitto's Next Gen Stat chart line was insane. He had nine pressures on 22 quarterback rushes, and 5 of those 9 pressures were 2.5 seconds and under. So when you have guys like Coop and Bonitto that can create that explosive burst around or inside to get into the face of a quarterback, it makes everything easier for you defensively going forward. I thought the defense, obviously, they were put in a lot of bad situations in Sunday's game here, but they answered the bell. I mean, they even knocked the Titans out of field goal range when Marvin Mims muffed the punt during the game, and the defense, Jonah Ellis, Zach Allen, just bumping them right back out. I mean, having a defense like that is great. And Rachel, it's something you don't want to rely on all season long, like all 17 games. Like, if you could sustain it, that would be great. But there's going to be times this season where the Broncos defense isn't necessarily playing their best, or, they're having a matchup that they're struggling with. That's where the offense has to come back and complement them. Hopefully week 1's trend isn't as similar as what we saw here, throughout the entire season. We don't want that to be the nature or the theme of it.
I'm typically not a person where I love to do comparing. But do you think that this Broncos defense right here in 2025 can be better than the Super Bowl 50 defense?
They could, but I think ultimately in order to do that, I think you have to cap it off with the Super Bowl win, and certainly I think a lot of people yesterday, especially on Twitter is always a fun place to deal with just kind of like the in the moment type of mentality that you see. Like, it's very reactionary, but I think a lot of that noise too, my first thought was, okay, hey, there was a lot of noise surrounding this team in the offseason. And look, I agree with Sean Payton. You can't be afraid to talk about the big goals that you have, right? And I don't think he's shy about doing that. Heck, he did it in the conference call here, how he says he hopes he can win a second Super Bowl, kind of like what Mike Shanahan did. So the idea is like you have to have these expectations, because if you're afraid to talk about it, then what's the point of trying? So you talk about it, but you have to do those things on a week-to-week basis to get there. I think this defense has a chance to be just as good, if not maybe better than that unit. The game has certainly changed quite a bit since 2015, but the fact that Denver's defense was as dominant as they were with what they were able to do, and 133 total yards of offense allowed there, that right there was incredible. And one thing that stood out to is they had high praise, players in the locker room, about Cam Ward after the game. They think he's going to be a pretty good player. I just think they need a better coaching staff around Cam. But what a tough test for a rookie quarterback against this defense.
Could not agree more. And honestly, I thought Cam played better than Bo did. Like, just the way he looked more comfortable out there. And again, I do think that has to do with Sean Payton's play calling, the playbook, etc. But Cam just looked like, especially in that first half, I've got this, go out there. Like, this team believes in me. I have an entire city behind me. I just felt like I could feel that up in the press box compared to when I looked at Bo and I was like, Bo's like screaming to the sidelines because he's pissed off, which, by the way, I love. I love that we have a very feisty quarterback. But I did just feel like that first half, Cam just seemed very in control. So I feel like we need to give our roses where we need to give those.
Yeah, and I think another thing too is I think that they really simplified things for Cam Ward offensively, and I think that's not a bad thing. I think the Broncos could benefit. Like, there were times where Sean simplified things for Bo last year, and it did wonders for the offense. Whereas I felt like yesterday was overly complicated all across the board here. And look, obviously, Broncos country, Rachel and I, we have more to talk about. We're going to continue to break things down. We're going to share some of our key takeaways from Sean's press conference here on Monday morning. Plus, we got some other post-game locker room footage for all of you here on the first installment of the Orange Crush podcast.
Yo, I can go all pro in these.
I can guard you and route you up.
You sure about that?
You fellas looking for a quarterback?
Let's go!
You're right, Billy. These do bring out my eyes.
Every shoe for every athlete.
Dix is the go.
I can't believe the Broncos got the win yesterday. After the roller coaster that we were going on, I'm like, wow. It's actually impressive that they did. That defense they're so good, Cody. I'm so excited for them this year.
Can we talk about Pat Surtain just once again continuing to erase everybody? Our good friend Troy Rank put out a tweet earlier. I can't remember exactly what it said verbatim, but it was basically like a do not disturb sign on Pat Surtain's side. To me, I was like, you got to put up a no solicitor sign because nobody gets through when it comes to Pat. I mean, just unbelievable. Once again, erasing Calvin Ridley from the equation here. And obviously, I think you look at that Titans offense, he's their best receiver on paper. He had a couple of drops when the Broncos were in zone coverage. That certainly didn't help. But, I mean, Pat turned in a great performance. Jaquan McMillan turned in a fantastic performance inside the nickel. Riley Moss playing well. I know that fans had some questions defensively coming into the season based on, Riley's injury last year. And then when he came back, the struggles relative to the Cincinnati game. But this secondary looked really good, including newcomer here, Talanoa Hufanga.
Oh my gosh, he was everywhere. And I just love how everyone talks about his energy and his leadership. And he has been such a great addition. The other thing I want to mention, though, when it comes to Pat, is the fact that Pat doesn't see a lot of action. Pat is always ready. Like, he never lets his guard down. And I feel like, think about even just in what we do, right? Like, if somebody's not talking to me, I'm like, oh, like, is there something on my phone? Obviously very different than when you're on a football field. But still, I'm sure you have to get a little bored because you're not going to be seeing the ball as often.
That's a challenge. And look, I can say this, having played cornerback, sometimes you play teams that, if you're playing a run heavy team that doesn't like to throw the football much, we always would coach up, or our coaches would tell us, hey, don't fall asleep because they'll hit you with the pass. Like, you just got to be ready for the time that they do it. I mean, Pat, it's so different with him just because of how elite level of a player he is. Yeah. He's 110% on every single play. He never falls asleep. He knows that, hey, I may not get targeted here, but there's going to be a time where they maybe try to take a shot and I got to be ready. Like, he embraces that mindset of always staying ready. And what's the saying? Like, you don't have to get ready if you stay ready. That is the epitome of Pat Surtain.
Totally. I could not agree more. And then we also have to talk about Jahdae Barron, first-round draft pick. Everyone was like, wait, why are they picking this kid? We need a running back. And look, it's really starting to pay off. And I love, Sean Payton even mentioned in his press conference earlier this morning, he doesn't have to have that pressure on him because really their defense is so elite already. And that's just going to help him grow. And I love that for him.
Well, and he, like I said, a great moment for him. He had a lot of praise in the locker room after the game as well because he recovered that fumble that Jaquan McMillan forced, in which, when the Broncos drafted him, a lot of people are saying, okay, well, this means Riley Moss is gone. This means Jaquan McMillan is gone. It's like, no, like they're adding to a strength of theirs. And there's a way for all these guys to see time on the field and eat. And obviously, Surtain and Moss, they played outside. They didn't come off. They played that spot all game long, whereas I think both Jade and Barrett and Jaquan each had 21 snaps each. They played some nickel personnel. They played dime. And it just so happens that Jaquan's strip sack on that final play led to Jade getting a fumble recovery here, kind of like a full circle moment. You just love that. And one thing he talked about in the post-game locker room afterwards was just that there's so much belief in this coaching staff in him that they're constantly just saying, hey, you've got this, great job. They're helping him work on some of the mistakes that he makes, but they're always uplifting him and they're always keeping him ready, which I think his mindset really meshes well with this staff.
Oh, I could not agree more. And I heard he was even carrying the game ball around in the locker room.
Yes.
I love that so much. Oh,
it was,
I really do.
I mean, and like that too, I think when you play in the preseason, you play in an NFL game, okay, it's the NFL, but what matters is like the regular season. It's your first actual game where you made the roster. Everything that you do matters. Everything counts towards your career and your talent. Like what you do in the preseason, you can get like 5 pick sixes in the preseason. It's not going to matter for your NFL career because it's the preseason. All this stuff matters. So I think it's just a big moment there. That's secondary. And I would say that you've seen this as well. Those group of guys in the defensive back room, they are so close on and off the field. So it's not much of a surprise that things are clicking for them exponentially quickly here.
Okay, I'm going to do a hot take, but maybe it's like slightly warm. Like I just turned on the stove, so it's like starting to warm up. I think Troy Franklin is about to absolutely explode, and I do think that Bo-Troy connection that they had at Oregon, I think we're about to see that.
Yeah, and I liked a little bit of the early glimpses we got early on. I wrote an article on Saturday for Mile High Sports kind of just outlining 3 players to watch. I put Troy Franklin as one. I said this could be a game where he maybe sees 7 targets. Yeah. He didn't see quite 7, but early on he saw some volume, including an 18-yard catch off of a beautiful play action design where Bo was rolling out to his left there and found Troy yards after the catch. And I think that connection there is something too, because like Troy was down last year as a rookie where, he was frustrated trying to figure it out. This was a frustrating game here for Bo Nix, but Troy Franklin, we caught up with him in the locker room after the game. Here's what he had to say about Bo and how the team kind of just rallies around him and supports him when he's struggling.
Just, staying poised and, knowing that it's the next play mentality type deal. So he's pretty good, but, we also encourage him to, just stay locked in.
Okay, so here's the thing. I had a sneaky suspicion that Troy Franklin was going to see quite a few touches because when I talked to him in the locker room on Friday, I was like, how are you feeling about your role? Sean Payton talks all the time about the role of these guys. And he just had like a big smile on his face. And I was like, okay, so clearly you're involved in this year's game plan because I asked him about the role last year and I said, was it frustrating and all these things? And he kind of goes on to say, yeah, but we all play a role. And I was like, well, do you talk to rookies about that role? He said, oh, yeah. And he's like, I've talked to Pat plenty about it, which is funny because Pat hardly saw any action, even field time, let alone.
Yeah, and so much of that, too. Even Sean said it in the conference call this morning. He said, I've got to find a way to work on that, with Pat necessarily. It wasn't, I don't think anything Pat was or wasn't doing. It was more so, we've got a specific game plan. This guy's going to be a primary on this play. So even if Pat's on the field, he may not even be getting the ball. He may not even be getting the look. And so it's just about trying to find that balance, which I would say, for Pat, I think he's got a great mindset to it. I think he's ahead of where, I think a lot of people thought he was going to be. Mm-hmm. But if there's anyone who can relate, it's Troy. And obviously that wide receiver room is very close. And you certainly see that here. Like Troy, I said I think he would get 7 targets. He ended up getting 6. He had 4 catches, 44 yards. In this game. And Pat Bryant's time is going to be coming. And look, I think, Rachel, this as well. Like on a week-to-week basis, it's going to change. Defensively, offensively, guys are going to step up and make plays that maybe didn't the week before. Yeah. It's only a matter of time before Pat gets in the mix. But I think the one thing that benefits him, he does the dirty work. He blocks. He doesn't complain about his role. Like if it was a Jerry Jeudy, it would be an entirely different story. Like Jerry, you would have known how frustrated he was. Even if Pat's frustrated, he doesn't show it.
He's such a happy guy. And we talked to him in the locker room on Wednesday of last week. And he was like, yeah, my entire house is going to be full. I've got people sleeping in my basement on my second level. There's for people coming in to cheer him on. I've decided, though, that Sean Payton's offense is a fantasy football owner's worst nightmare because they're no matter what, just going to rotate guys. Like they're never just going to go with the hot hand.
And I feel like that it's a little bit of a blessing and a curse, right? If it's working, great. If it's not working, it's frustrating. And so far in Sean's time here in Denver, it hasn't worked. You've seen the mass rotation of different personnel. They'll go from 13 to 12, then they'll go to 11 personnel. Then they'll not have a single tight end on the field and just go wide receivers. And then you're rotating all these guys into different looks. And it's like, can you really establish a consistent flow and rhythm offensively if you have different guys in on every play? Whereas I think you look at teams like the Buffalo Bills, the Baltimore Ravens, who had, the game of the week, what a shootout. What a game that was on Sunday night. Great. But they have their steady, consistent guys in for a majority of the game without all the mass substitutions. There has to be a connection there.
Oh, I can't even imagine being in the Ravens meetings this morning or this afternoon that they're going to have. Oh my gosh. I just can't imagine, right? We talk all the time. We always joke in the media of I can't imagine what it's like after a bad Sean Payton game. That game, you had a 99.1% chance to win that game and you let it go. I was like, oh my gosh.
It's frustrating. 15-point lead at one point with 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter in your season opener. And you're the first team in NFL history to give up that lead and lose, and which is crazy. It's like Matt Prater, with some of these former Broncos still around. How is Matt Prater still in the league? Which is crazy to me. But
no, he looked like he was going to puke though. So
yeah, no, a lot of nerves there. It's cold, obviously. My question to you is, when we watch a team like the Ravens and the Bills play, example on Sunday night, to me, I look at how Denver plays defensively. And it's all right, I think Denver defensively can do some things here, but the Broncos need to be able to have that type of aggressiveness and offensive firepower. I think if they really want to push to compete deeper in the playoffs, you'll run into these teams, and you have to be able to do that. Based on what we saw in week one, I don't think that Denver's there yet, but I think they can get there this year. And I think that's something that we're going to dive a little bit deeper to here on Orange Crush here today. But Broncos country coming up next, we're going to dive into all that. We'll look at the offense, and we'll also hear from Mike McGlinchey, who was very blunt about the Broncos' offensive struggles.
Broncos get the win 20-12 over the Tennessee Titans in week one. And I feel like there is so much to talk about, but can I give somebody the roses that really nobody else is talking about real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
The punter, Jeremy Crawshaw.
Yeah.
I feel like nobody's really talking about it. He had a fantastic week one.
I think we ignored it just because of how frustrating maybe the offense was. Obviously there were a lot of concerns about Jeremy in the preseason, but I thought he did a fantastic job. 48-yard average for him all throughout the entire day. He did a really good job, I think, with his hang time. I thought the coverage team, the Gunners getting downfield, I thought they did a tremendous job as well. You couldn't have asked for a better performance, because if, realistically speaking, if Crawshaw would have struggled on top of everything else with the offensive struggles, even the kick return given up right before halftime, 71 yards, it could have really compounded into something more negative. And once again, it just would have been so unfair to the Broncos defense, who just started out almost every drive in bad field position.
No, I'm totally with you. Yeah, I was just nobody's really talking about him, but for how much we talked about him during training camp and even in the weeks before this weekend, I feel like everyone was like, oh, we don't know what we're going to see. We've seen him have some really good bombs downfield, but we've also seen him have some pretty bad punts. I thought he did a really nice job, and I wonder how much of that is because of practice. As you and I both know, they decided to switch it up, and they'll just bring him in randomly to have one kick and then, kind of have that game scenario.
It keeps you fresh. I think when you're playing a game, you're sitting there on the sideline, you may not just be moving. You're just observing the game. And then, you third down, coach yells, punt alert, which, you don't always want to punt. You want to be able to convert on third down and sustain drives here. But I think that's benefited Crawshaw a little bit, just because you keep your leg ready, right? And certainly, his leg got a nice little workout in first regular season action. You're hoping that those preseason struggles were just that, preseason struggles. So far, so good for the Australian. I'm excited about that here, but I wanted us to get into a little bit more conversation about the offense and kind of the struggles that they had. The run game got going in the second half, which I think is something they can build on going against this Colts team this week. But I felt like Mike McGlinchey in the locker room was very blunt about how the offense performed here. And Mike always gives us great stuff, but I feel like he nailed it in this post-game locker room conversation. Here's what he had to say.
Well, they brought a lot of pressure, so we were able. I just didn't think we got enough of a rhythm offensively in the first half to commit to running the football, to be able to impose our will on that team. We turned the ball over far too much. We didn't allow drives to even get started by not converting first downs. 4 turnovers is egregious, and that has to stop. And when you turn the ball over 4 times, you don't get the privilege of running the football like that because you're not staying on the field. So it's a full team effort. We got to be able to be better there. Thank God we have the defense that we do, and we'll get it cleaned up for next week.
I love that. You don't have the privilege of running the ball when you have that many turnovers. I could not agree more. I love the phrasing of that so much.
Yeah, and look, Mike is a great leader. He speaks with a lot of conviction, and it's true. If you are turning the ball over, if you're not efficient on first down, how can you get rhythm? How can you sustain drives when, or even with penalties? We'll even throw that into the mix as well, because let's say, there was a time where the Broncos, I think they had like a 15-yard pass completion. It got called back due to a holding call on Ben Powers. So it negates your positive play that you had. It sets you back even further. And then so much is when you're going backwards on first down or even second down, then it changes what you're able to do as a play caller. And certainly it makes it easier for the defense because, hey, if it's 3rd and long, why would I go man coverage? I'm just going to say, we're going to keep everything in front of us. We're going to take away the deep stuff. We want you to throw it short, and we're going to rally and tackle. That's how a lot of teams played the Broncos last year in some of those games. The Colts game last year specifically, they want to prohibit the deep stuff, and they're okay with you throwing the short stuff just to rally and tackle. But when you can't run the ball, it makes everything one-dimensional. I think that's where the frustration comes in here.
And I think that's honestly, too, just what happened in the third quarter, the end of the third quarter and the fourth quarter for Tennessee is they became one-dimensional because the defense was so insane. But I like that Mike McGlinchey won, said thank God for this defense because I do think that he's going to keep them alive for a majority of this season. But 2, just, again, it is a luxury to be able to run the ball, and you cannot do that if you have the turnovers. But the nice thing is, and I hope you feel the same way, Bo Nix is not going to have that same performance. His work ethic is so strong that he was insanely frustrated. I know it actually took him a while to get to the podium because everybody said he was kind of stirring in the locker room a little bit.
Yeah, he was sitting there. I think after a game, you want to have time to decompress. You're going to see your family for a quick second. But I think Bo was just trying to process everything. He was frustrated with how he played, and I like that. People I think just think, okay, Bo played terribly. He's happy about it. All right, we're like, no, like Twitter. There's such a disconnect from reality sometimes on the outrage you see on Twitter. You know this as well as anyone. We're around Bo. Nobody's harder on Bo than Bo himself, and he acknowledged that he played poorly. He's got to be better, 100%. I think the one thing that we're seeing is we're seeing the extremes on both spectrums. I think we can criticize his play here in week 1 for what he did, the mistakes that he made, and say, he's got to be better than that because that's absolutely true. Then you see the extremes where people are like, oh, he's not the franchise quarterback. He's done. The Broncos should be looking at other QBs like, time out. Let's not do that.
No, agreed. Okay, and this podcast is going way too fast. I feel like you and I could talk for an hour, so I'm so excited that we're going to be doing this multiple times a week. But 2 things we need to talk about. Justin Trinad and his replacement over Dre Greenlaw. Now, Sean Payton did say Dre Greenlaw will most likely be back sooner rather than later, which is good news. Trinad did a fantastic job. He came ready, he came prepared, and I love that because nobody really knew what was going to happen all week.
And Justin has been on this team for so long, and I think just the experience he got last year being thrust into the starting lineup, there's some learning curves that you have to have with that. Okay. He looked very comfortable to the point where I said to myself after the game, and I talked to Justin. Justin and I have a great relationship. He's such a good dude, but I said to myself, okay, get Dre Greenlaw where he needs to be. For now, they're good with Justin. Justin can fill that role, and he can play well.
Totally agree. It's not like you're forced to bring Dre out there if he's not 100%, which is good. Now, okay, I'm going to say this because I know you do have a relationship with Justin. When you look at Dre and Justin, how far up is Dre compared to the play with Justin?
Dre is just a different level. And I don't understand. Justin, I think, is more cerebral in the sense that, what Justin maybe lacks from a speed and or physicality standpoint, he makes up with by being very smart, knowing where to be, knowing everybody's roles defensively. Dre's very football smart, but Dre's got this elite level athleticism that just kind of takes it to the next level. I think that's probably the best way I could describe it.
Okay, the other one, and I just thought of another thing too. See, there's just so many things you're thinking about. Evan Ingram. Obviously,
Yes.
he leaves with that hamstring injury. In 2024, the 2024 season, he missed 3 games at the beginning of the season because of a hamstring injury. What's your concern level right now?
It's a great question because they're also calling it a calf. So is it a calf? Is it a hamstring? I don't know. Like, obviously, he didn't finish the game, but people were saying, like, did you see him in the locker room after the game? I said, no, we didn't see him. But if you go to the Broncos social media site, they posted victory celebration locker room pictures on their Twitter, and you can see him standing up. So he's there. To me, that's good news. I feel like while we were waiting to go in the locker room, I saw him coming out of like the X-ray MRI room. So they always do that. That's a standard procedure. Yep. He looked like he was moving okay. I just think, you want to be cautious with something like that. I know we said one final thing. We've got to talk about Jalil.
I literally was just about to bring that up. I was like, wait a second, we have to talk about it. The cryptic Instagram post, Cody.
Well, obviously, for him, better days coming. He posted that Sunday morning outside the office, which looked like Sean Payton. So it was maybe like Sean was telling him there, like, hey, you're going to be inactive here, which Jalil hasn't been inactive since he's been a member of the Broncos. And that was tough here. But here's what I love. You mentioned the RJ Harvey run. Who was the first guy down the field dressed in street clothes, picking him up, celebrating? Jalil. That says everything you need to know about Jalil. In my opinion, I think Sean should play Jalil this week and just see what you have versus, we saw with Bidet. Bidet had the drop on the screenplay. But I think just see what you have here with this running back room. You have 4 really good guys. See what Jalil can bring to the table. It bummed me out a little bit that Jalil was inactive.
I agree with you. And I mean, Bidet didn't have the greatest day, right? I think of the short pass from Bo to the, to the left, and then it hit his right calf, I want to say, too. And just those tiny little miscommunications right there can be a big play if you let it play out the way it's supposed to, which is unfortunate. But I do think Sean Payton hates cryptic messages, hates it. And I do wonder if something will get said about that better days coming post.
I don't know. I think Sean and Jalil have such a great relationship, kind of the equity there that it's like, I don't think it was like a bad thing. Now, if you said like, this is some BS or something like that, I would have been like, all right, you probably would have heard something. I think Jalil will be good. He's got a great mentality. He's got a great mindset. And look, I'm excited to see how the season unfolds. Broncos country, your team is 1-0.
I was going to say they are 1-0. I love Jalil. I hope he does get the opportunity because I would like to see how that quote unquote battle does play out. But there's so much more to get into, especially as we look ahead to the Colts on Wednesday here. Cody, it is always a pleasure. I'm so stoked to be doing this with you. We're going to have a blast. You and I, funny thing is too, for everybody, Cody and I actually became good friends talking about weddings. I had just gotten engaged. Yep. He was about to propose. Now we're both married. And I feel like that's just how this relationship has bloomed. So yes, we're going to talk a lot about football, but there's also going to be plenty of other things like Cody getting a dog here soon. I'm so excited for you.
Yes. And, my wife and I's regular season episode of What the Football is going to be coming out here very shortly. But with that said, Broncos country, you can catch Rachel and I Mondays, Wednesdays, and sometimes on Saturdays here for the Orange Crush podcast here, part of Mile High Sports. Every team, every day.